Hello, and welcome to the Blue Ridge Mountains of Northwestern North Carolina. So I got a really cool project that I'd like to walk you through in my workshop this evening. But before we go there, I would be really happy if you would hit that subscribe and like button. That'll help me get to the point where I can start making better videos and more videos featuring all kinds of different things that I do up here. So yeah, let's get over to the workshop. So today what I'm going to do is I'm going to be building making a tabletop for an existing metal table base for a friend of mine who actually gave me a bunch of logs about a year ago. This one being from a Black Locust log. What I did was, the log really wasn't big enough to mill into boards. It was, only about that big. So what I did is I cut the log into a bunch of little cookie slabs. I really love the shape of this wood. Figured I could probably make some really cool end tables. So yeah, my friend wanted to know if I could build him a table. Absolutely. So what I'm going to do is we're going to plane this down on each side, make it completely even, and then we'll create some bow tie inlays that we'll put on these cracks to keep the cracks from expanding. This wood is actually pretty dry, even though it's thick. It's been in my hot barn here for the past year. Well, hot in the summertime, very hot in the summertime actually. And I've been doing moisture tests on it, and it's pretty much stabilized. So we're gonna go ahead and work with it. So yeah, let's get this thing in the machine and get it planed down. So I'm actually going to be planing this down on my Onefinity CNC machine. This is really a cool machine. It serves multiple purposes in my workshop, and quite often I do use it for planing down pieces of wood. I know that you can make planing sleds for routers and such. So far, I've just been using my Onefinity for that job. One thing that I want to point out here is this particular slab is just clears this. I mean, you can see there's barely any room. And the interesting thing is that this slab of wood is actually pretty level already. I can move this around, and you can see that it's pretty level without me even doing any planing. But I'm going to plane it anyway, mostly so I can get all of this rough cut off of here. I actually did cut this slab, or these slabs from this Black Locust on my sawmill, which is probably one of the reasons why, or the reason why it's so level already. So yeah, we'll get the rough cut from the sawmill out of this wood, get it a little bit more smooth so we don't have to do quite as much sanding on it. Okay, so for my surfacing bit, this is just a pretty cheap surfacing bit that I got off of Amazon. It's a bin stack 1-inch 3-flute surfacing bit. It does great. I surface a lot of hardwood with these bits. And it takes them a long time before they get dull, which is pretty good considering how cheap they are. I want to say it was probably $13 or something. So let me get that. Tell you what, I'm not too happy with these Makita. These Makita routers are not meant for this job. These trim routers. One of the next purchases I'm going to make is let's get myself an actual spindle. So tighten this up a little bit. All right. Just wanna... So for the bow tie inlays that I'm going to make on the slab, I typically like to use a contrasting piece of wood, you know, in color. Walnut really makes a good bow tie. I have this scrap piece of walnut, and as you can see, it's quite deformed. So what I'm going to do is surface this down, just so that when I make the bow tie cuts on the CNC, there's not going to be any wiggle room, and it'll cut the bow ties very precisely. And in order to do that, I need to surface this down, not only so that I can get it to sit flat, but that I can use the double-sided carpenter's tape to tape it to my spoil board, just to prevent it from moving at all. So to start with, you can see the warp here. It's definitely not flat, and it's not sitting flat. So what you do here is I just have this piece of wood with a little wedge cut into it, and I slide that under. Just slide it under there until I get the wiggle out. And then what I'll do is I'll just tape this up to keep it stationary. So when I cut the bow ties, I'm going to be using a 2-flute downcut 1/4 inch bit. First I want to measure this piece of wood that I got here. It's about 8 inches by 10 inches. So that way when I go and create my my template in V-carve to cut out the bow ties, I want to make sure I can get at least 3 of them out of this piece of wood. And the other thing too, you can see that I didn't quite plane it all the way down to where it took a lot of this rough edge out of here. It doesn't really matter, because once I cut the bow ties out and put them in the Black Locust cookie, I'm going to be shaving this thing down more. I'm going to be using the belt sander, and all this is going to go away. Mostly I just planed it down to get a relatively flat surface for surfacing, and so that I could stick it to the spoil board. So I had tried to do a test carve to cut out one of the bow ties here, and it got down a little, you know, part way down into the wood, and the wood moved a little bit, and so that double-sided carpenter's tape didn't have a real strong enough grip on the wood. So I put a little extra support with some painter's tape around it, and we'll recut. Unfortunately, this piece is toast because it moved. I can't use it. So I'm hoping that I still have enough wood to carve 2 here, one here and one here, and then I have another one carving over here. Let's go. Let's turn this on and get it started. So that was quick work of getting the bow ties cut out on the CNC. As you can see, I have them laid out here on the slab, roughly where I want to have them. Basically they're there mainly to prevent the big cracks from growing anymore. Now when I cut these out in the CNC, I could have actually done a inlay cut, which I didn't. I just did a straight cut. The inlay cut will actually give it like some curvature, so it's easier to, get it into the groove that you cut out. But then I just got to fiddle with another cut and a change of a bit on the CNC. For me, when I'm doing something small like this, it's easier for me to just sand a little edge on these than filling with changing bits and all of that. So if I was doing a big inlay project, I would do it the right way, but maybe I like to do things the hard way. So yeah, basically what I do is I'll take this over, and if I make a lot more videos, you'll see that I don't really have much for fancy equipment in my workshop. The CNC really is my fancy piece of equipment. Everything else is just using the old Ryobi 10-inch drill press with the little sanding thing on here, and I'll just use that to sand the edges off to make it easier for me to pound it into the inlay cut on the slab. So I sanded the edges down on the bow ties, kind of gave it a little bit of a bevel on the edges. That just makes it easier for the piece to fit into the cut that I make in the slab. It'll kind of, you won't have to be dead on perfect. You can be off just slightly, and when you start pounding it in, it'll go into place. The next step is to actually cut out the places in the slab where I want these bow ties to go. So I do want to mention that so I'm not actually going to cut the profile in the slab quite as deep as this bow tie is thick. So when I actually put the bow tie in, it's actually going to be sticking up a little bit. That just gives me a little wiggle room so that I can sand all this stuff off. And on this particular piece, you can see that when I started to sand it, I started sanding the bevel on the wrong side. I wanted to sand it on that side, so I need to give myself some wiggle room so that I can sand that off and make it flush with the slab. Perfect. So there you have it. The bow ties are embedded in the wood now. The next step for me is going to be filling these cracks with epoxy resin. And one of the reasons why I do that before I actually shave these down and smooth things out is because typically when I fill these with resin, I'll do my best to watch things and, continue to fill as it slowly goes down, but generally I'll let things sit overnight or a couple of days, and I'll come back out and the level has dropped a little bit in the cracks because of the air bubbles slowly making their way out during the curing process. So that way, if I get a little bit of a drop in the crack, I'm going to be basically surfacing this again anyway. That way I won't have to do a second pour, at least to fill the cracks. So yeah, I'm going to let this sit overnight, let the glue cure, and then tomorrow we'll start with the epoxy resin fill. Alright, I'm getting ready here to fill the cracks with the epoxy resin. So I have my basic supplies that I need to do the job. I have my resin and the hardener. It's a 1-to-1 mix. Got my measuring cup here so I can make sure that I get a 1-to-1 mix. Popsicle stick to do the mixing. Some epoxy tape, which is what I'm going to use to cover these cracks. Some silicone to apply to this crack here on the side. There's just no good way to put tape on that and prevent the epoxy from running out. And of course, my latex gloves just to keep my hands from getting sticky. So I got the scrap piece of OSB clamped down about as good as I can get it with a limited reach of my clamps. It's on there fairly tight, but really it's just to kind of help keep the resin tape from sagging. And you know, if the resin tape sags a little bit, then it might start to peel off and then the resin will run out. But this should be good. So yeah, we just need to wait for the silicone to cure, and then we can mix and pour our epoxy resin. So this is the back of the piece where I had the epoxy tape, and it did a good job. As you can see, the epoxy did kind of run out a little bit here. You know, normally you'd want it to just stay in the crack, but that's the reason why I had that piece of OSB on there clamped down, just to kind of put a pressure on that tape, because I knew that it was going to probably try to work its way out a little bit. If I hadn't had that pressure on there, it probably would have leaked out. But it stayed within the where I had the tape, so that's good. So we didn't lose anything through leaking. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to run the same surfacing file that I ran before, except I'm not going to start all the way down here because it's unnecessary. I'm going to probably start up here so I can surface these bow ties down a little bit, stop it once it gets to the end of the bow ties, readjust and surface down here, and then I'll probably go over it once again the full thing, just to get everything nice and even. Okay, now it's starting to look like something. So we got it surface down, straight as an arrow. The bow tie inlays look really good. The epoxy filled in the cracks nice, and you can even see a bunch of these hairline cracks in the wood that existed during the drying process, and that was one of the reasons why I had kind of just threw a bunch of the epoxy resin all over the place, just so that it would seep down into those little cracks. The final steps at this point is get the rest of this bark off of this piece. You've probably been wondering why I've waited until this point to do it. Really, there is no rhyme or reason. I could have done that the very first step if I wanted to, but for whatever reason I decided to wait until just about the end to peel that off. Probably because I'm going to be, you know, sanding all of this. I figured that's a good time to worry about that as I'm sanding everything else down. That's also a good time to just get the rest of the bark off and smooth it all out. Sanding down the sides is a little bit of a challenge on these extremely curved surfaces, especially when you have these, you know, these little cavities and stuff. So what I actually found works pretty well for me is I use a spoon carving tool. I believe this is a hook knife, typically used for carving spoons, like I said, in little bowls and stuff. But this thing actually works great at getting a lot of this stuff off. On the inside here, I discovered that there was quite a bit of rot on the outer edge after I peeled the bark off, and this makes really quick work of it. But a little bit more satisfying than using the power tool, actually. So yeah, I just basically scrape around the edges, the entire edge of the slab, get as much loose stuff off as I can, and then I pretty much have to go around with some sandpaper, do it the old school way. So I've gone around the entire slab here, and I've shaved just about everything off that wanted to easily come off. You can see down here lots of wood shavings off from the carving knives, and this thing has got a really nice smooth finish. Just from sanding. It feels like glass. I sanded it from 40 grit up to 1000 grit. The first pass with the 40 grit took me quite a while because there were all kinds of lines from the surfacing bit that I wanted to get out. It's probably not 100% perfect, but I think it looks pretty good. One thing I like about using the carving knives, I'm cleaning up the edge, it kind of gives that like a hewn type of look and feel. Just gives it more of a rustic touch, I think. One of the last steps here, as far as getting this thing sanded down, is just to go over the edges here so they're not sharp. Smooth them out a little bit. I do that a little bit with my carving knife. Then I go over it with sandpaper. And so on the bottom of the slab, I applied a healthy coat of polyurethane that I had in the shop. This is the bottom. It doesn't really matter. Essentially what I just wanted to do was seal it. The end grain is notorious for cracking if it isn't sealed. Even though I took various moisture readings throughout the past several months, and the percentage of moisture seemed to stabilize, that is, it really wasn't changing much. I guarantee there's still some moisture in this wood. Having the end grain sealed on both sides will help. The other side, I'm actually going to apply a wood wax instead. I think a wax looks much better than polyurethane or polyacrylic or anything like that. So I'm going to let this cure overnight, and then tomorrow we'll apply the finish to the top. So for my final step, I'm going to apply a wood wax, and the wood wax I'm going to be using is this the Real Milk Paint wood wax. And I was doing some research on different waxes that I could use. This one looked like an interesting brand, so I tried it, and I really like it. So I pretty much stuck with it. So yeah, I'll wax this up. Unfortunately, my one of my camera setups, my action camera that I mount, is no longer working. So I'm just gonna have to wax this off camera because I can't hold the camera and wax at the same time. Well, I probably could, but the camera would be shaking all over the place. So I'll just show you the final product when I'm done. All right, so here we have the finished product. Camera, I wish would show you just how nice that this wax really looks, but take my word for it that the wax really brings out the color of the wood. I applied the wax at the sides as well. Got a really smooth finish, and I'll let it cure for a few days, maybe apply another coat, but otherwise the thing's good to go. And in comparison, here's another cookie slab. So we essentially took a slab that looked similar to this, really rough. This one has a little bit more cracking than the other one did, but basically the same sort of thing. And turn something like that into this.